Сейчас слово предоставляется президенту.
Now, I give the floor to President Putin.
Уважаемые коллеги, друзья,
Thank you, dear colleagues and friends. First of all, for my part, I'd like to welcome the get to our BRICS summit and thank President Xi Jinping for organizing this extended session. I believe it's highly useful to host the BRICS Plus meeting with heads of state interested to forge a win-win partnership with our alliance attending. Given the proximity of view on pressing global political and economic problems and ways to resolve them, it's of importance that countries represented here advocate for establishing a truly democratic, multipolar world order based on the principles of equality, justice, and mutual respect. They support the freedom of trade and finance from barriers, politically motivated restrictions on a global scale. I'd like to underscore that the relevance of interacting with partners that share our values has risen dramatically in the current context of disequilibrium of international affairs. This situation had long been brewing and has become an inevitable outcome of the policies of those who are in favor of the so-called liberal world order, encompassing the erosion of the international law, subversion of multilateral institutions, for the sake of maintaining their dominance. Some countries have been consistently striving to supersede the current global architecture based on the central role of the United Nations with a certain rule-based order. What are the rules and who invented them? No one knows. But the attempts to constrain development of states that are not ready to live by the rules engineered by one and the reckless application of legitimate restrictive tools multiplied by the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic only aggravated the crisis complications in the global economy. The global trade is plunged in dispute, and during their resolution, norms and principles of the WTO are taken into account less and less. So we know how things developed in that organization in the past year. The entire international monetary system is being shaken and impaired. The production, logistical, investment chains are decoupled. A sharp price hike for foodstuffs, commodities, and energy has a major socioeconomic effect, in particular on emerging nations in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. And I'd like to reiterate once again, it's not the outcome of the recent months, nor a consequence of the special military operation conducted by the Russian Federation to defend us. I want to underscore that the sharp rise of inflation didn't happen yesterday. It is the outcome of the endemic, irresponsible macroeconomic policies by the G7 nations, unbridled cash printing and accumulating uncollateralized debt. These developments accelerated when the pandemic struck, when a global support and demand crunch for goods and services came into play. The food markets now have the biggest disbalance ever. It's noteworthy, and I mentioned that at the recent St. Pete Economic Forum, they printed cash and they gave it in the wealthy, rich countries, and then they started hoovering all the foodstuffs and goods at the global markets. The United States in the past used to be a net exporter of foodstuffs. Now, their imports overtake their exports by 17 billion USD. And it's noteworthy that the price hike on basic agricultural items such as grain hasn't hit the West hardest, but the developing countries where bread and flour are a staple and the survival means for the bulk of the population. I believe the French Queen, Marie Antoinette, is believed to utter a statement with indifference looking at the rampant hungry crowd outside her palace. Once they have no bread, let them eat cake. It is this cynicism that some of the Western nations are showing now, destabilizing the global production of agricultural products, imposing restrictions, for instance, on imports of Russian and Belarusian fertilizers and impeding Russian grain export to global markets. And by the way, we have very good crops this year, and this year we supply 37 million tons, and that will go up in future 50 million tons of exports of grains, and still we see that the insurance of ships carrying grain cargoes are hindered, and the bank transactions for the commercial contracts. At the same time, we're seeing artificial stoke up about cessation of Ukrainian grain transport by the Black Sea ports, and according to the American and our assessments, it only makes up 6 to 7 million tons of wheat and maize. That definitely is a tiny proportion, and that will not resolve the global food crunch. And I stated on many occasions, and I would like to reiterate that the Russian Federation would not impede the Ukrainian exports and would stand ready to provide a free passage of grain vessels into international waters if the Ukrainian military clear mines and adjacent areas. Besides, we have a joint understanding of that with the UN Secretariat. Only one mere practical thing is lacking, which is a constructive approach by Kiev. I underline, Russia is a significant and responsible participant of the global foodstuff market. Doubtless, we are ready to fulfill our contractual obligations, good faith, supplying agricultural products, fertilizers, energy, and other essential products. I must mention also that Russia has been providing humanitarian aid to many nations in need, in particular Russian foodstuffs, was free of charge not long ago to Lebanon, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Cuba, Sudan, and other countries. Distinguished colleagues, once again, I'd like to note that in order to step up practical cooperation between BRICS, the partners represented here, we have real and ready opportunities at hand, and within your reciprocal interest and personal interest in maintaining close business contacts and ties. No less relevant is the expansion of BRICS interaction with the regional groups of integration of ASEAN, African Union, the Caribbean Community, the Gulf Cooperation Council, as well as the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. And definitely there are huge prospects opening for cooperation of all our nations in coupling the Eurasian Economic Union integration with the Chinese major infrastructure and trade project called the Belt and Road Initiative. We are convinced that only in concert we can and should tackle many serious matters on the agenda. And our today's meeting is an example of constructive work in this vein. I thank you for your kind attention.